So there were these two Trappist monks discussing Unitarianism. Sounds like the start of a pretty bad joke. But it really happened. It really took place between Thomas Merton and a colleague of his. I would have loved to have heard that discussion. Instead, I can only rely on Merton's recollection of that conversation written up in his autobiography. It seems that a visiting professor of some nondescript Protestant persuasion made a guest appearance at the Abbey, a seldom occurrence to be sure. And from what I could tell, the professor must have delivered something like a survey course on the various expressions of Protestant thought. Now, why, only God knows, but he was beguiled to mention Unitarianism in his lecture. In a follow-up group discussion, Merton confessed his confusion about what he understood Unitarianism to be or not to be, and wanted to learn more. His Catholic colleague apparently did a good job in explaining to Merton the baffling components of Unitarianism. Merton looked up only to find the professor nodding in agreement. The stumbling block for Merton was the reference to many layers of belief and the nonconformity to any specific guiding truth. Now, Merton was not born a Catholic. His father was Anglican and his mother a Quaker. He grew up as a non-believer with neither parent insisting that he adopt a particular faith. He was unwittingly a Unitarian without knowing it. As a graduate student in English, he began reading some powerful literature about faith and Catholicism, mainly because his mentor was Catholic. And he took his conversion to Catholicism quite seriously. It came upon him one day like an epiphany. He had no choice. It's something that he simply had to do. Now, a person I like who was not so serious about his conversion to Catholicism was the writer Evelyn Waugh. When chided by friends how he could behave so badly after converting to Roman Catholicism, he replied, "But think how much worse I would be if I wasn't a Catholic." Merton followed his newly acquired religious doctrine to the letter in his early days, and this was before he became a scholar in world religions and engaged in meaningful interfaith dialogues with such astounding people like the Dalai Lama, D.J. Suzuki, and Thich Nhat Hanh. But as Unitarianism was explained to him while he was still a brash young monk learning the ropes, he dismissed the eclectic approach entrenched in Unitarianism by insisting that was not theology, but it was merely sociology merged with a smattering of religious history. His initial impression may be also the impression of many. It's as though Unitarianism is a mere cafeteria of beliefs, and you grab hold of whatever looks good on any particular day. But that would be to miss the beauty of it all. It would be to miss the Unitarian miracle entirely, in the very depth of our rich theology. Gathered under one roof is a stunning array of religious sensibilities that may lean towards rational theism, humanism, neo-paganism, ecofeminism, atheism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, mystic Sufism, and other isms of your fancy. A sociologist could get vertigo just contemplating these various demographics in one church. But this diverse bunch shows up on Sunday mornings to engage in one common worship experience. This enormous spectrum of beliefs and cultural and religious identities draw us together. We grab hold of a vision as one people, discerning a clear understanding of what is really meant by a moral community. And so these differing spiritual paths covenant with each other to honor and respect their different journeys. And in so doing, we bind together as advocates on behalf of an abused planet. We are united with like-minded sensibilities that revere the interdependent web of all existence, making no distinctions in treating human, plant, and animal life with dignity and respect. We further recognize that the blessings of life must be available to all. And so we respond passionately to the call for justice in a world so shamefully out of kilter. I wish that Rebecca Parker, president of our UU seminary in Berkeley, could have explained our faith to Thomas Merton instead of this nameless visiting Protestant professor. She views the history of Unitarianism and Universalism as moments of religious crises in which the inherited tradition didn't work. So throughout our history, if you really look at it with the right kind of lens and understanding, you will find, peppered amongst the very intriguing history, you'll find religious crises in which the inherited tradition didn't work. And I can think of many examples. In the early 19th century, when Calvinism preached the doctrine of atonement, warning that only a few souls would be saved, a crisis arose for those people who dared critique that tradition as far too limiting a view of the divine. And so they became Universalists, because rather than beating your head against the wall of your tradition, you can walk around it and move on, which is what they did as Universalists. Unitarians reached a crisis when the teachings of their earlier tradition embraced original sin and the depravity of human souls. Unitarians, with the aid of reason, conscience, and their own human experience, reformulated the message and moved on. Unitarians insisted that the earth and all its creatures are holy, and that no one is saved until we are all saved, and peace and justice prevail upon this fragile earth. As a creedless church, we are not, and I repeat, we are not an empty vessel. We stand in awe and reverence before the multitude of mysteries that bless the universe, but admit to a crisis when traditions try to inform us with archaic formulas and answers about our beginnings and our destinies. We've got to move on. For many of us, if not most of us, we are assembled here because of a crisis that we have reached regarding our own personal religious histories. It's not easy when our own inherited religious tradition, the religion with which we grew up, just doesn't seem to work any longer. It's like hitting an impasse. And so the best thing to do really is to stop hitting our heads against this wall of dogmatic truth, walk around it, and move on. Gotta keep on going. In moving on, there are myriad paths available. Unitarianism is an option, a religion that undermines neither intellect, nor science, nor common sense. Now, there's another option. In fact, I just read about it this summer. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a former Pentecostal preacher who hit a crisis with his own faith tradition opened the first formal gathering place for atheists in the whole state of Louisiana. And he calls the place Joie de Vivre. Which kind of works. I mean, it's easy to tell your neighbors, you know, no, I'm not going to the atheist place. I'm going to Joie de Vivre. I guess it's a hangover, that French influence in Louisiana, something like that. Well, I certainly like the name, but fear it would ultimately ring empty as a religious experience. I agree with atheists in rejecting a supernatural deity in human form who judges us. But you know, when you think about it, that's way too simplistic a look at religion. It's a very narrow scope of what the religious is really all about. But today we live in a world come of age where we accept science as dislodging these superstitions that surround traditional religion. Traditional churches are losing their grip on holding members captive through elements of fear. Now, although our modern consciousness has evolved, I think pretty much for the most part, evolved beyond superstition, don't we also feel compelled to ask, is there not more to life than chemistry, physics, and evolutionary biology? We also yearn for understanding and meaning beyond materialism. What are the spiritual values that keep us centered and that inspire us with hope and confidence to keep on with the holy work of transforming the world? Now, searching for spirituality, or in the search for spirituality, some of us may want to make a leap of faith. But I only ask that we look before we leap. Might be a good idea. We follow much in the footsteps of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who raised the profound question, infinite religious in and of itself. And that question is, what is the chief end of human life? What is the chief end of human life? This is a question that keeps us focused, knowing that, it precludes things like consumerism, accumulation of stuff, war, oppression. Yeah, we can scale that all away, but what is the chief end of human life? Therein lies our exploration. Now, we may gather here with diverse spiritual inklings and leanings, yet we remain committed together to try to figure this out. Another option for people who want to free themselves of their religious past and move on. Another option is a whole bunch of people who insist that they are spiritual rather than religious. Now, these are people who claim they always find God in sunsets. And I tried talking with many of these people, and I explained to them Unitarianism, and they look a little interested, and then they go, nah, I find God in sunsets. And I want to say to them, I really understand, because I hate sunsets. That's why I go to church. You know, in all those moments of hiking, you're up 10,000 feet, and there's this huge expanse of a vista, and there are just mountains beyond mountains in silver form. Wow, you find meaning in that? Now, That's why I prefer going to church.